Welcome. This is our final community presentation meeting, and I appreciate you all joining us tonight. We are at the Carriage Place Community Recreation Center and appreciate the students and staff, in particular I believe we call the manager, Kelly, who's graciously hosting us tonight amongst their many activities. If you went to the wrong room, you might have found pottery or gymnastics, so if you were looking for that, we're not going to be doing either one of those tonight. But I hear pottery is pretty good, I ask, so they started at 6. So welcome. We don't have all of our members here yet. I'm assuming traffic has led to some of those issues. Maybe the cold weather too, but we do have a quorum, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We have an extensive agenda tonight, so we want to try to move through topics as quickly as possible so we have a chance to get to all of them and get all of the information out. I'm going to start with the approval of the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review them? Does anyone have any questions or comments about the minutes? Can I have a motion to approve the minutes? Is there a second? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. We are going to move on to a summary of public comments that we've received to date. Before we do that, I just kind of wanted to make one point to the committee members that we do have a number of presentations, as you can see from the items laying next to you on the table, and a number of topics that we haven't yet covered, like area commission. So I'm going to ask the committee members to focus on questions tonight. So as the presenters make their presentations, if you have questions about the topics, questions you want answered, please ask those tonight. But as far as us trying to start negotiating, discussing, trying to come up with our recommendations, we're going to leave that for our working meetings. So we're going to focus on questions to try to get through all the presentations, all the questions, and audience comments as well. So if there's any questions, or if we kind of get off topic, I'll try to put us back on so we can get through the agenda. So a summary of public comments. Edward, is that you tonight? Thank you.
Yes. Since the November 17th meeting, 18 new submissions have arrived. Of those 18 submissions, 2 are speakers who have asked to speak this evening, Reverend Nancy Day Ackauer and Emmanuel V. Remy. That brings the total number of public comment submissions to 46. And additionally, Ms. Stephanie Megas will be delivering raw copies of all of the submissions electronically to members' inboxes.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions about the public comments that we've received to date? Okay. We are going to move on to the committee discussion on the previous public comments and presentations. I believe this was specifically about Professor, oh my gosh, I just forgot how to say his last name. Takaji, thank you. From his presentation at the last meeting, I know he had limited time. Who's going to address that tonight? Edward.
Chair Coe, you had requested that staff look into one of the questions Professor Takaji had raised as a research request, and the question had essentially boiled down to how much money has the City of Columbus spent defending the at-large system of representation on City Council? The answer to that question is $0 to defend the at-large system of representation from legal challenges. Because of limited time and resources, we were able to look at another city. We chose a city that we knew had districts and had to defend those districts from judicial challenges, which was the city of Chicago. I apologize, I'm blanking on the time horizon, but I believe it's over the past 10 years, they have spent $20 million in court defending their maps for various reasons.
And I think after Professor Takaji presented the last time and he had limited time, we indicated that if anyone had any questions, they should submit those to staff so we could get those to him. I believe my question was the only follow-up. I'm not aware of any others. Does anyone have any questions that have remained unanswered from that presentation? Okay. We are going to keep moving on then. We are going to start with a presentation on area commissions, which is really a new topic that we haven't spent a lot of time talking about over the last few meetings. So we have Assistant Director of the Department of Neighborhoods, Toya Johnson, who's joined us this evening as well.
Thank you, Chair Coe. Good evening, everyone. My name is Toya Johnson. I'm the Assistant Director with the Department of Neighborhoods, and I will be going over Columbus City Code Section 3109, which talks about the area commissions. So as soon as there's a presentation there, so as soon as he moves to the first slide, we'll begin. As I mentioned, Columbus City Code Section 3109 establishes the area commissions for the city of Columbus. I know there's lots of text there, and so what I'll do is try to pull out all that information so you don't have to read everything verbatim. But basically, council established the area commissions in the 1970s, and it was to afford additional voluntary citizen participation in decision-making in an advisory capacity. The other main function is to facilitate communication and understanding and cooperation between our city, our neighborhood groups, our city officials, and developers coming into the neighborhoods to make improvements. The area commissions all have a set of bylaws that have to be disclosed and published, and the disclosure of the bylaws pretty much outlines the procedures and rules that assures accessibility of the necessary information to the public. There are some general standards and filing procedures that serve as guidelines for establishments of the area commissions, and those help to assure compliance with the minimum requirements that are listed in the code. And they basically are there to permit some flexibility and individuality without the legislative burden of having detailed codification and periodic amendments for each of the commissions. Again, the overall purpose for the area commissions is for them to serve as a liaison between our neighborhood groups, our property owners, our residents, developers, and city officials. This is a map of our 18 area commissions as they are laid out throughout the city. Again, here are the names of all those 18 commissions. I won't run through each one of those, but they are, again, far north, we have some that go all the way far east, west, south. They cover the entire area of the city of Columbus. Section 3109 also talks about how do you form an area commission. And it first begins with a petition. Basically, with the petition, they have to, anyone who lives in the city, who works in the city, or who owns property in the city, they can make a petition to council to start an area commission, and they start off as a task force. One of the other requirements for them to present to council to be at area commissions is that they have to gain 500 signatures of residents and property owners in the area. They also have to provide notification to the residents that they're seeking to establish an area commission, and they have to notify within 30 days after filing a petition all the residents that they are interested in establishing an area commission. And any residents that have any objections to that have 60 days to file that written objection. In what they have to do in submitting the documents to the city clerk, they have to provide in that information some concise description of the proposed area in which they want to establish the commission. They have to also provide a description of the residents that are on the task force, so background information about the individuals who are bringing this petition to council for a commission. One of those individuals on that task force must serve as an agent for any notices. They also have to provide a statement of proposed bylaws, rules, and what their commission selection procedures will be. And again, the 500 signatures by residents and/or property owners within that area. When you talk about a commission area, it needs to be a compact area that's homogeneous. It has to be manageable in size, large enough to be recognized, but also small enough to be have effective representation. The area also should maintain the neighborhood identity and cohesiveness, and whenever feasible, the area commission or area should coincide with designated city planning areas. When you talk about the members of the area commission, again, each of the area commissions will have no less than 7 members, but no more than 21 members. And all of those members shall be appointed by the mayor with the concurrence of council. When you talk about terms for the area commissioners, again, the nominations for those individuals will come to the mayor for consideration, again, after having been voted by the body, the task force body or the area commission body. They will elect those individuals and then share that information with the mayor's office and, again, approval for council. The terms are no less than 2 years, but no more than 4 years. So each of the area commissions, again, they set their own bylaws, and so some area commissions, their members will have 2-year terms, some will have 3-year terms, and some will have 4-year terms. Some of the duties of the area commissions, they do work closely with the city officials in terms of local planning. They do assist in creating plans and policies that kind of serve as guidelines for future development in their area. They also bring problems in any areas of concern to the attention of the appropriate city government officials, and they also recommend solutions and/or legislation to improve those things. They are required to hold regular public meetings. Again, their bylaws will outline what regular public meetings will be. Some could be monthly, some may be bi-monthly, but their bylaws will set out what regular public meetings are. They also are able to hold public hearings on problems or issues or proposals that will be affecting their area. They can do forums and also surveys of interested parties for areas of concern as well. Again, they do work to solicit active cooperation of all residents and segments of that area, and they also initiate and support local proposals that are presented, and then again, they promote and encourage local businesses. They also work to do some area enhancements. They do review the capital improvement budgets. They propose new items, and they also make changes or recommend changes related to the area. They make recommendations for the restoration and preservation of historical elements, and they also review area plans and provide input prior to the adoption by council. They request and receive reports from the City of Columbus in terms of services in their areas. They can also request and receive reports on proposed changes for things that are going on in their area, and they can recommend approval or disapproval of those changes. They review and evaluate pending legislation that may affect their area prior to consideration by council. And then again, they do advise on rezoning, special permits, variances, demolitions, and zoning appeals. So again, it is a truly advisory role that the area commissions have in terms of what's taking place in their areas as they relate to any type of development and things like that prior to council's approval. And then lastly, they work closely with land use and, again, like I said, zoning advising. Again, lots of text. I'll pull out kind of the main points of that. But the commissions may meet with applicants for rezonings, special permits, demolition permits, any type of variances regarding property that is either wholly or partially within the commission area. And they discuss the proposals, their relationship to the area, and any possible modifications. The Area Commission also has to conduct those meetings and notify the appropriate body of their recommendations in a timely manner. One of the things that I think some folks may have a misconception about is that area commissions, if they don't approve something, that is grounds for automatic non-approval by the City of Columbus. That may postpone the approval, but it doesn't guarantee that it won't be approved. Also, suggestions and comments on the area commission shall also, again, be advisory. The things that the commissions bring to the city and to council are in regards to recommendations that they want to see happen or not happen in their particular area. Again, if an applicant fails to comply with the area commission recommendations, that in and of itself does not constitute that the city or council will not approve it. It may postpone the approval, but it just brings back an opportunity for the applicant to go back for further discussion to see what areas could be changed so that the area commission can then be on board or with one accord with the developers and city government.
And members of the committee, per one of the members' research requests as they saw the topics, committee member McCarthy asked if we had come across models in other cities for bodies similar to area commissions. And so through the research, we pulled two interesting and different models for your consideration. The first is in the city of Cincinnati, and as you'll see that map, if you take out the lines and the colors in between, that map is still the city map of Cincinnati. What you'll find is the city of Cincinnati has a 9-member, all-at-large city council, but all areas of the city of Cincinnati are covered by a community council. They're equivalent to our area commissions. That total brings it to 51 community councils covering 80 square miles of territory. Those 51 community councils also cover all 298,000 residents of the city of Cincinnati. Those community councils are recognized by the city of Cincinnati, although some of them are dormant. And so if they choose to become active again, they have to kind of interact with Cincinnati City Hall, Cincinnati City Council to let them know, hey, we're active again, we're going to try to advise you in zoning matters, in neighborhood matters, and we're active again. Similarly to Columbus area commissions, they do advise on zoning, they do advise on development policy, and one thing that we noticed that they seem to be a little more active in is neighborhood programming. The Cincinnati community councils are eligible for $6,800 a year in kind of restricted discretionary funding. So they apply for the funds and they can use it on things like membership drives, newsletters, beautification and cleanup activities, youth summer employment or cultural activities for neighborhoods or workshops for the community members. And so I think some of the funding issues give a little flexibility for Cincinnati's community councils, and we saw that as an interesting model that covered and represented all Cincinnati residents to present to the committee. The other interesting model that we found was in the city of Seattle, which is covered by 13 neighborhood councils. Cincinnati is a 9-member hybrid city council with 7 districts, but all areas of Seattle are covered by these neighborhood councils, which is about 142 square miles and 685,000 residents, with all of the neighborhood councils recognized by the city. The difference between what we see in Cincinnati and what we see in Columbus comes insofar as they have kind of a structure that feeds up to their Department of Neighborhoods. And so you'll see they have community councils, local chambers of commerce, parent-teachers associations, nonprofit organizations. Those representatives are represented on the district councils. The leadership of those district councils then sits on the broader city neighborhood council, which comes together to recommend matching funds from the city for neighborhood projects to the mayor and city council. And they kind of help prioritize and implement certain neighborhood planning and assistance programs. And so those were 2 interesting models that we found that we thought could pique the interest of the committee and might present some interesting comparative information. In terms of the comparative analysis, that concludes this portion. And I don't want to speak for Assistant Director Johnson, but we'd be happy to answer any questions or concerns that the committee has.
I just want to make a point of clarification. I think if you've been here, I'm the chair of the Southwest Area Commission, so I'm pretty familiar with area commissions. You made a comment earlier about the map covered the entire area of the city of Columbus, and I just want to clarify that our area commissions do not cover all of the city of Columbus. There are areas that don't have any area commissions. They may have a strong civic association or community group, and so some areas have nothing. So I just wanted to clarify that as we were making these points about what's different. That
Yes, you are correct. There are areas of the city that are not covered, but are looking to establish some type of area commission. So they're in that process for some of the areas. But as the city grows, we will need to look at how those outlying areas that don't have representation will then be included.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you. I know from the information that I requested before, we have 298 civic associations. And my point being, though, that those associations, they can be very active. I'm looking at this list, and some can be very active and can be used for the same purposes as a area commission.
So the way that the structure works is we have our block watches that feed into our civic associations. Our civic associations, individuals from those organizations are then allowed to be elected into the area commissions. And so some of those very large, very active civic associations may be represented in the area commissions. But again, the area commissions, they elect those individuals that will serve from those civic associations and/or block watches. Most of the civic associations, or quite a few of the civic associations, are somehow included in the larger area commissions. And we do have quite a few of those that are not active area civic associations.
But the point I guess I was trying to make, and not so eloquently, was that the civic associations, their membership do have a voice. I mean, they can express their concerns about issues within their area. They're not excluded because they're not part of a commission. That's the point that I'm making, that these 298 civic associations, whether they're part of the commissions or not, still have a unified voice and are able to express and are available for consultation if.
Yes, they do. And a lot of those civic associations work with our neighborhood liaisons who are in the communities. We have six neighborhood liaisons who work very closely with our civic associations, our block watches, and our area commissions. So you're right. If they're not represented on the area commissions, they still have their voices heard because they can work with our neighborhood liaisons.
Okay. Are all of our area commissions active right now?
The 18 that we have now are active, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Co-Committee Member Bradley, as a point, just to reemphasize your point, oftentimes when council hears certain zoning matters, there are oftentimes non-area commission bodies that are serving in that role of advising council on zoning matters. So you'll see the Italian Village Society, you'll see the German Village Society, you'll see the Northland Community Council acting in that role and saying we either approve or disapprove this particular zoning because it doesn't fit with our area plan or the community aesthetic or things of that nature. And so, yes, we do see many organizations on that list that aren't the 18 area commissions still serving in that advisory capacity.
I think the other point I wanted to clarify was just the sort of process that isn't as clear in that typically when there's an applicant for zoning, demolition permits, potentially graphics permits, they're required to come before area commissions. So they have to come to the area commission for a presentation before they would get to the development commission, BZA, those kinds of things. The statutes don't require them to go before an area commission as for a civic association. So potentially that's one of the differences, that if the Northland Community Council, there's not a specific requirement to go before them. I think most developers do because the community is going to come out and be involved in that. And then when you were talking about the postponement if they disagree, area commissions only make recommendations, but typically you'll see the Development Commission, BZA, wanting to work those issues out. So although they don't have to vote the way the Area Commission does, you'll typically see developers trying to work that out with area commissions because it's a pretty big stumbling block to get to the Development Commission long before you get to City Council, even if the neighborhood groups haven't already sort of worked out what those issues are. Not saying they always do. We all have examples of where that doesn't happen, but I think that's part of the process. So the postponement may not be as much as postponing as it takes longer to work out those challenges. Do you have a question?
Yeah. This is when, during the debate on district representation for council, the area commission system was most often cited as how neighborhoods have input at city council. And so I'd like to talk about, or I have a few questions about, on paper, this looks wonderful, but I'm curious about how it works in reality. There are a few things in here. Functions and duties of area commissions, recommend solutions or legislation. Could we find out what legislation over the last 5-10 years has come from area commissions, has been recommended by area commissions?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then another function is to review and evaluate pending legislation that affects the area prior to consideration by council. I'm curious about how that works. Is that a formal process? Does city council notify an area commission if there's legislation that affects their area?
More often than not, that legislation tends to move through the zoning committee as is pertinent to a area of the city. And so, and I'm not saying that's every instance, but the majority of those instances, the area commission knows about this matter before council does.
Okay, so this is zoning then. It wouldn't be necessarily an item in the capital budget that an area commission might want input on, street repairs.
When it comes to both the operating budget and the capital budget, those are initiated by the mayor's office. Those are provided to area commissions along with any other interested citizen prior to submission, actually at the same time of submission to council. And those individuals are asked to provide feedback on things that are specific to their area. And very frequently you'll see neighborhood liaisons play the role of actively seeking that input.
Okay, wonderful. I'm also curious if we could get the attendance of area commission representatives at city council meetings, because I know there's an entire bank of seats for area commissions, and when I covered city council for the Dispatch, they were rarely used.
We can make an attempt to do so, however, with attendance not being taken.
Oh, okay.
For those seats,
Okay. It's unless someone speaks.
Right. It's kind of difficult to track. Someone may have attended and never spoken, and we don't necessarily have that record of them being there.
Okay. Is there at city council meetings any formal time, any time set aside for area commission members to address council? Or is that part of a public?
Recently, President Klein has invited area commission presidents to come to council and speak at the beginning to deliver a neighborhood report as a custom under his presidency.
Okay. And then I appreciate that if you can get that information. The only other thing I just want to point out is in the city code, in the rules for forming an area commission, this is what it says. It should be compact, homogeneous, manageable in size, large enough for recognition, and small enough for effective representation. So we're saying our area commissions need to be small enough to be represented well by people, but our entire city is at-large council members. So it's just a point to make.
Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah. That's
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you. I'm just curious to know what kind of resources, whether it's staffing resources or funding, does the city provide for area commissions for organizational purposes?
The City of Columbus provides $2,500 annually to each of the area commissions. Again, we don't provide formal staffing on those area commissions. I know that some of the area commissions do have seats for, say, a mayor's representative, and oftentimes one of our neighborhood liaison may be the person appointed to those particular commissions. Again, the neighborhood liaisons really would be, I guess, the best equivalent for a staff in terms of they do attend the area commission meetings. They help to make sure that the area commissions are following their bylaws. If there's any concerns or issues, they bring those back to city government to let them know about that. So while there's no formal staff person that sits on any of the area commissions per se, we do have the neighborhood liaisons who works very closely with all those area commissions and civic associations.
You would also typically see Columbus Police liaisons, sometimes Columbus Fire liaisons. At least that's what I'm familiar with attending meetings. And training was the other thing I was going to say. I think there's been a number of trainings that the city has provided for area commission members through the different departments, whether it be City Attorney Pfeiffer has done some training, zoning has done training to provide resources and information, especially new members.
For new members, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's something that I think they try to do annually, is to have an annual training for all the area commissions to talk about any new procedures or anything like that. And usually City Attorney Pfeiffer's office and various other city departments will come in and talk about things that are relevant.
I have excuse me, I have a couple questions. Can you hear me? Okay. So what are those budgets typically, that $2,500, what are those typically used for? Is it at the discretion of the commission? And then could you give some examples of what they might use those funds for?
A lot of the commissions use those for the operations of the commission. If they have a website, they can use the funding to help maintain the website. For any type of business that the commission has is pretty much what they use it for. And the way it's distributed, they get half of that money up in the beginning of the year. Then in the middle of the year, they have to submit, receipts for what has been used before they get that second disbursement. And then if that second disbursement has been made, they have until the end of the year to utilize the rest of that funding. Again, submitting those receipts. Any unused funding is returned to the city.
And then, Edward, this may be a question for you, but what is the relationship between council and those commissions in terms of, so for example, there are some state commissions where state reps might sit on those commissions as commission members. Have we had that before or not? Or do they attend those meetings, or is it based on invitation, or could they serve or attend if that's in their community where they live?
The meetings are all public, so anyone can attend the meetings.
Sure.
In terms of whether or not they sit on the area commissions, again, the bylaws state how many people can sit, and if they, I don't know that there's necessarily any type of regulations that say that they couldn't sit on there. Again, it would be based on the area commission's bylaws because they set up how their commission is going to be operated and who can sit on it. Again, if they live in the city of Columbus or live in that area, own a business in that area, they are eligible to be a part of that commission.
Mr. Johnson, the community engagement position, I don't know if it's one or two people in the city council area. Do they have any formal responsibilities or association with the area commissions or civic associations?
Yes, Council's Community Engagement Division was expressly created to interact and create a deeper relationship with area commissions, civic associations, block watch, and just about any other level of community group that exists to ensure that all of the members, regardless, are informed of what's going on in each area so that Council is, in its entirety, aware of what's going on in the neighborhoods.
So we have the mayor's neighborhood liaisons. and then we have specific staff from council. How many people are part of that community engagement division?
4, and they're separated by region. So there's one that attends, community groups in the north, in the east, west, and south.
Are they separate from the Legislative Research Office? Or are any of them doing double duty?
Typically, no. We do interact with one another to say there might be an initiative going on at council, and so this might be important for neighborhoods to be aware of. You might want to share this as you attend an area commission.
So
or
they're
community
separate.
meeting.
So they're separate staff for the
Yes.
engagement and separate for legislative research.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
When did that start, the council engagement?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the
Oh,
question.
when did the council engagement with the neighborhood start? Sounds like a neat idea.
That was one of Council President Klein's first decisions when he became council president, was to create the community engagement team.
Okay.
I'm curious about the area commissions. This financial support we provide, does that go solely to area commissions or also to civic associations?
It goes solely to the area commissions.
Okay. And it strikes me as a paltry sum, given the importance that they play in the decision-making process. Do people turn money back in, or do they exhaust it each time?
It depends. We have both instances occur. So you do have some that will use their funding solely, and then there's others that do not.
You are undoubtedly the smartest person about how they work.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well.
I say you are undoubtedly the smartest person about how they work. I'm just curious about whether some struggle because of sort of a back office. There's nobody to send meeting notices, get out agendas, make mailings, whatever. I'm just curious about whether or not you think effectiveness and even survival could be ramped up by deeper resources.
I think there's always room for improvement in any organization. I know that, again, it is all voluntary, so many of those individuals who sit on the area commissions have full-time jobs. Chair Coe being a good example of that. I think it just depends on the availability of those individuals that are on the commission as to how much time they're able to actually invest in getting some of that backdoor information done and making sure that information is out there, relevant and timely and things like that.
I know you did you mentioned that Cincinnati, I think, provided resources. Do you know any place that maintains a back office for all area commissions? Meaning that if they have codes of regulations that conform to a particular format, then in fact there is 4 people downtown who are helping punch out the back office sort of stuff to take that sort of workload off of the people out in the neighborhood.
You're asking, is there a city that basically has an office that does administrative functions for all of their neighborhood? Not that I'm aware of. That doesn't mean that model doesn't exist, but we would have to look into that a lot deeper.
Again, and I would say that our neighborhood liaisons, again, they do assist our area commissions with requests. So some of that work does come on the city's end if they are asked by or if they ask our neighborhood liaisons to work with them. So some of those things are handled by city staff.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if you would know this off the top of your head, but the largest area commission? If you don't know, if we could just get it, I'm curious to know which one would be the largest.
So are you meaning largest by size or number?
Largest by how many commission members?
University.
I think it's university.
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 University? The crowd says.
Geographically, the largest area commission would be the far south side area commission. And then we would actually have to do a lot more digging to determine largest by population representation.
And which is the oldest? Do we know that? Again, you may have to dig for that one. I'm just curious.
We would have to go back and look at legislation to see which area commission got their petition in first to be formed.
Any other questions on the area commissions, Bob?
Are area commissions elected are members of area commissions elected at large, or are they elected by neighborhood within an area? Or how are they?
I guess as an initial point of clarification, in terms of how area commissions are seated, the Columbus City Code does say that area commissioners are appointed by the mayor with the concurrence of council. However, it has been the custom of the mayor and city council to respect the local election processes of area commissions and just appoint whoever won the election.
Okay.
There are some, and this depends on their bylaws. Some will subdivide their area commission to do so, while I believe many others tend to just kind of do, I guess, at large based on their territory.
Could we get a list of which ones are at large and who has representatives
Yes.
of districts? Thank you.
Any other questions on area commissions? Okay. We're going to move on to the second presentation, which is related to the full-time, part-time distinction or question about council members. Again, a topic we haven't really addressed other than sort of superficially at our previous meetings. Edward, I think you're going to address that for us.
Thank you, members of the committee. I'll be presenting for your information for your consideration on employment status of council members. That's basically to say whether or not members of council ought to be considered full-time or part-time. The most important place for us to start is the Columbus City Charter, where we have limited guidance on the employment status of all 10 elective officers of the city. We have 7 members of council. The city attorney and the city auditor have similar language in their respective sections of the city charter that speak to their qualifications. The mayor is the only elective officer with different language regarding qualifications. Section 58 of the Columbus City Charter prohibits the mayor of Columbus from holding any form of employment beyond the mayoralty. The mayor shall not hold any other public office or employment. While sections 6, 66, and 79 prohibit members of council, the city attorney, and the city auditor from holding any other public office. Since the implementation of the city charter, those sections have been interpreted to be permissive of outside employment for those office holders. Because the charge of this committee is to examine sections of the charter relevant to council, staff looked at the qualifications section or another analogous section of other cities' charters to determine the employment status of council members around the country that fall into the Best Cities Index and the 7 Ohio cities that we're using for comparison. When examining those charters, we find a variety of clauses and passages that designate employment status. For some cities, they use the term full-time in their charter. Others have a prohibition against outside employment, or a clause exists that designates the role of council member as an individual's primary obligation. The primary obligation clause does not appear to ban outside employment, but does create the expectation of full-time public service. In cities where members are part-time, we also see usage of the term part-time. The city's laws could be silent on the matter, or pay is on a per meeting or per diem basis. And research has shown that that is, for some reason, especially true of cities in the state of Texas. Oftentimes, when looking at the cities where council members are part-time, the language is not informative as to the necessary time and attention required to be an effective local official. To that end, staff looked at research from the National League of Cities and the National Conference of State Legislatures to provide definitions pertaining to full-time and part-time city councils. 13 of our cities on the Best Cities Index have full-time councils, and that's defined as 32 or more hours, which is at least 80% of the standard 40-hour work week, spent on legislative functions like council session, committee meetings and work, constituent services, community meetings, and elections work in relevant years. Many full-time city councils have large staffs, personal staffers that report directly to members, and centralized support staff are paid sufficiently to make a living without outside income and tend to be in medium to highly populated cities and meet year-round. 16 cities on the Best Cities Index, including Columbus, have part-time councils. For the sake of providing clear definitions, staff is providing a definition of part-time plus to make clear the obligations many of these members face, as opposed to strictly part-time councils. These members spend about 2/3 or 26 hours of the standard 40-hour work week or more on the aforementioned legislative functions, but they could spend more or less. Part-time plus councils tend to have medium-sized staffs, are salaried but allow outside employment, and these cities are as large as 8.5 million in population, New York City, or as small as 650,000 residents. Many of these cities meet or are in session for 9 months or more out of the year. And then lastly, we have the strictly part-time cities where it's 20 hours plus or minus per week spent on legislative functions. The pay is nominal or on a per meeting basis. Outside income is required. Some of these cities' charters use language that assumes an outside job is being held by council members. And they tend to be smaller cities, towns, and villages, but as I said, oddly enough, cities in this state of Texas pay on a per meeting basis for some reason. But as you deliberate, I would encourage you to consider a couple of factors in determining whether or not council members should be part-time or remain under the current designation or be part-time, or full-time, excuse me, or maybe a clause that would essentially make members full-time. The amount of time currently spent on being a council member, the amount of time required to be an effective member of council, resident expectations of member availability, should outside income be permitted, and the staff resources available to members. Thank you for your time and attention, and I'm free to answer any questions or initiate further research as requested.
Anyone have any questions? Please.
I want to clear. Yes. The current code is silent. It does not classify council as part-time or full-time. Correct? It's silent. It's not addressed.
Correct.
So that's a term we've been tossing out, that they're, quote, part-time.
Yes.
Okay. And the way it stands now, council members set their own time, work schedule, whatever. It's at their discretion currently. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
How are the 10 officers compensated? Who decides that, under what mechanism?
At the 2014 Charter Review Commission, the Charter Review Committee recommended and the electors of Columbus approved a Citizens Commission on Elected Official Pay. This is a 5-member body that last met in 2015, will meet again in 2018, and then every 4 years thereafter. They're required to take into consideration economic information and comparative analysis on peer cities to recommend, a salary level for the 10 elective officers, at which time council may decline to act or may act through ordinance to set the pay. However, council cannot set the pay above what the Compensation Commission recommends.
And what is the current pay for a council member?
The current pay for a council member, I believe, is $52,000 and some change, and I can provide the precise number for you with a follow-up.
And when was the last time that was changed?
That was at the recommendation of the 2015 Citizens Commission on Elected Official Compensation.
Chair, I have a couple more. What is the size of the council staff and their various functions? And are there individual staff members that report to council person X? Or are they more of a pool effort?
Each council member has 2 personal staffers, a legislative aide and a legislative assistant that report directly to the council member. The council president additionally has a chief of staff to help organize the work program of council staff. And then there are, I want to say, 14 central staffers that include legislative research and community engagement that are available to all 7 members of council.
And what is the yearly budget for council? Give or take, or get it back to me.
I don't want to misspeak, so if I could give that number to you as a follow-up request.
Okay, thank you.
Please.
One other point, when we talk about part-time, I think it should be noted that although they're considered part-time, our council members, they do have resources. You mentioned staff, but there's a legislative research office, there's the communications staff. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to remember here. Their service does qualify to count for public employees' retirement, and they do have the option of participating in the city's medical health insurance program. So it's not a part-time without any supporting, yes, that people would normally think.
Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you again for putting this information together. It's very helpful. This is going to sound like a weird question perhaps, but did you notice any correlation between the size of staff and the disposition of the council member office or the council full-time status? In other words, did those council members in other cities that were full-time have smaller staff, or and vice versa, were part-time councils, did they have a heavier staff? Were you able to determine if there was any correlation?
I wouldn't say that there was a correlation. We did observe with full-time councils, they tended to have larger staffs. We're talking 3 personal staffers, 4 personal staffers, some were upwards of 7 personal staffers reporting to a council member once council got to that full-time level and it was a large city.
Okay. Just one quick follow-up. Did any of the council, other cities that you examined, did you notice if any of them gave their council members the option of full-time or part-time status?
That was not observed. No.
Any other questions? Please.
So we say 32 hours per week is considered a full-time, but on the average, do we know, how do you know how many hours the council members are putting in?
Each council member can tend to put in different amounts. We do have some members who do have outside employment. I would say that many of the members on council put in more than 26 hours to do the job effectively of doing committee work, of doing community meetings, of doing constituent work. But we do have some members who approach 40 or exceed 40 hours per week to do the job.
Yes.
In the recent election, again, one of the biggest arguments against a larger council was that we would be spending a lot more money on council members' salaries. And could you repeat what their salary is right now?
I believe I said 52 and some change.
Okay, so
Sure.
$52,000. Could we get a comparison of these cities on the list and what their council members are paid? perhaps, if that's possible. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on this topic?
I'd like to point out, we did chase this car a short distance previously by asking what sort of money it costs to run the
Yeah,
council
I think that-
enterprise. And Edward, I know you have that number on the top of your head. We use two methods, and you might articulate the two approaches. He's looking it up. He's cheating.
Sorry, I had some back of the envelope numbers, I apologize. What we had basically said was to divide the total council budget, which I guess this will give me the end number, we were saying about $537,297 per member, but that included the cost of support staff, the centralized policy staff, not just the member's salary.
Pardon me, I think you also then tried to identify a member and support staff only, and came up with a lower number. Two methodologies, two different.
That number was 285 to add the member and just the direct staff.
See, I think we could argue all day long about what the formula is, but those are two data points that give you a spread of our cost sort of per member.
Any other questions on this topic? Okay, we're going to move on to the third topic, which we had some discussion about 2 meetings ago, and I think there were a lot of follow-up questions, ideas, and topics that still needed to be explored. So we're going to continue with vacancies and appointments. Brian, I think you're going to help address some of those issues tonight.
Yes, thank you. And as Adam gets this together, I think for the competition for the longest presentation, I win. So I'm going to try to go through this as quickly as possible. First, I want to thank Adam and Tracy for their excellent work and background research. And part 1 of this discussion was absolutely invaluable. And just want to very quickly go through some of those data points and background information before we go into the committee's research requests. So we begin by expanding outside the 25 largest cities. We've actually looked at the 50 largest cities so that we could capture any additional forms of filling vacancies that were not captured previously. This is a breakdown by form of government, the number of instances, and how they actually fill a council vacancy. The next slide will give you the percentages for each of those cities as well. What you'll see there is essentially council managers use about 35% for appointments, 40 for hybrid, 25 for special elections, and it goes down from there. The next slide, you'll see the grouping here, sort of very clear grouping in the appointment column. There is some usage in the hybrid systems, mainly in the council manager and in the mayor council forms of government. You'll see that special elections are used almost exclusively in the council consolidated government, so city, county governments. So I'm going to very quickly go through each of these and give you a list of those cities. So you'll see here the council manager, top 50 cities, everything from Arlington, Texas, and Austin to Virginia Beach and Wichita. For the mayor-alderman commission, you'll see it's everything from Chicago and Milwaukee to Portland and San Francisco. I will note that San Francisco is a consolidated government as well, but their board of supervisors operates more like a commission or an alderman form of government than a city council. And Miami has a very interesting sort of dual government relationship with Dade County. They attempted to consolidate. That did not pass, but they do have some consolidated services in that city. We look at our peer cities, the mayor council, and I think this is very instructive. If you could go back to that one, Adam. So you'll see there that 44% use a hybrid system, 50% use an appointment. Only 6% of mayor council cities in the top 50 cities in the nation use a special election. So those peer cities, obviously Columbus is in that list, but again, ranging from Albuquerque and Atlanta to Tulsa and Washington, D.C. Then we come to the mayor council consolidated. And as I said before, 71% of those cities use a special election to fill a vacancy. List there is Denver, Indianapolis, Jacksonville, Louisville, Nashville, New York, and Philadelphia. So as we looked at this data, first of all, we did not have time to expand this to the top 50 cities, so we're going back to our original top 25 data set. We asked ourselves, were there any statistically significant links between other features of that city and the way that they filled vacancies? And we found that there were two. The first is that as staggered terms go up, special elections go down. So cities that have staggered terms are more likely to use an appointment process or a hybrid process. Cities that only elect every 4 years are more likely to call a special election to fill a vacancy. And that tends to make sense, intuitive sense, that if you have to wait for 4 years, you're more likely to use a special election. You'll see that that accounts for 86.5%, so that's the R squared, so very high degree of correlation in those data points. The next one was not intuitive, but made sense as we began to think about it and talk about it. We see that for cities that have nonpartisan elections, the more likely you are to have a nonpartisan election, the less likely you are to have a special election. And the converse, which will make a little bit more sense, if you have partisan primaries, you're more likely to have a special election. And again, intuitively, that makes sense. If you're electing either at-large or by districts, Democrat, Republican, or some other party, you're more likely to want your party to make that decision versus members of a different party. Indianapolis is a good example, although they do not use special elections. They use a sort of an odd caucus process. There and in Indianapolis, you have Democrats who control the council, but you do have a very sizable Republican contingent on that council. Were there a Republican district representative who stepped down, they would not want the Democrat-controlled council filling that vacancy. So it sort of made sense as we thought through that. So I'm going to quickly go through the most common methods, and there are three of filling vacancies. The first is an appointment. Pretty straightforward. It's what Columbus does. Council votes to appoint a qualified elector to fill the vacancy. There are three variations we're talking about. The first is appointing for the not unexpired term, so essentially till the next regular election or special election. The next is appointment with a person elected at a special immediately taking office, which was an interesting quirk that we saw in some cities. And then lastly, appointment for the entire unexpired term. Columbus uses an appointment until either a special election or the next regular municipal election. So an appointee can never serve more than 2 years in the city of Columbus. These are of the top 50 cities, 21 that use an appointment process. You'll see a lot of peer cities there in that list. Next, we'll go to the hybrid system. There's a lot of discussion about that. We wanted to go back and come to you with a definition that was very intuitive here. The most common hybrid form essentially says that if you have a year or less left on a term, you can appoint someone. Otherwise, you must have a special election. The variations there are giving council the authority to appoint within a given time. If council doesn't act, the backstop is a special election. And then there are some cities that give council the option in their charter. They can either appoint or they can call a special election. Cities that use a hybrid method, there are 16 of them, and you'll see them listed from Atlanta and Boston to San Diego and Tulsa. And then finally, we have special elections. In these cities, there is no allowance for an appointment. You must have a special election. There are, however, some variations there. One is requiring a special election within a certain time frame. This would be akin to our charter amendment process, where the Ohio Constitution requires that we call a special election within a certain number of days after that petition is put on the ballot by council. The other is aligning their elections with existing election dates, whether at the city or at the state level. What we'll see there for special elections, Arlington, Austin, all the way down to, again, Portland and DC. So we were asked to look at potential alternatives for filling vacancies. And what we've tried to do is provide any relevant cities in the top 50 that utilize this system. If there is no city, we'll note that as well. We were also asked to provide staff's opinion of the pros and cons of any given alternative method. So please take note that this is simply staff's opinion. It is not a recommendation. The first is what we would call a limited appointment caretaker. In this provision, an entity can vote to appoint a qualified elector to fill the vacancy, but the person, the appointee, is ineligible to run to retain the seat. This could apply to an election for the unexpired term and/or for a new term in that specific seat. Variations of this that we've seen, including recently here in Columbus, are a handshake agreement that is non-binding. So essentially, council saying we will appoint you only if you agree not to run, or a charter provision that is legally binding with regard to caretaker. So in the top 50 cities, there's one city that uses this on a very limited basis, and this is San Diego. San Diego uses a hybrid system. If there's a vacancy in the final year of a term, you can appoint, but that an individual may not run for election in that city. I would note that this is the most contentious section of San Diego's city charter. It's been amended 17 times since it was adopted. It was most recently amended, I believe it was last year or the year before, and the caretaker provision was first added in 1994. So pros and cons of caretaker provision. Pros, it would clearly remove any opportunity for incumbency for anyone who's appointed. It would also typically be filled by someone who's a seasoned or retired public servant, someone who is doing this for, I think we would all agree, all the right reasons. There are, however, we feel some cons to this approach as well. This individual would never face election, so they would never have any accountability to the voters that they're serving. There would be a very limited pool of potential appointees, and I'll expand on that a little bit. If you think about a person putting their life on hold for 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, however long it is, that would have to be someone who is either retired or has a great deal of flexibility in their professional life. And the number of people who would be willing to do that, knowing that there's no future aspiration for office, would also likely be very limited. And that was somewhat the experience of the city of Columbus when we did a caretaker appointment. There is a potential that an individual could be appointed for 2 years, but never have the potential for election. And I would note that it's only used in a very limited capacity in one city in the top 50 in the nation. So the next we're calling affectionately first loser. So this would be an entity that would be required to appoint the person who had the most votes but didn't win the office. In a field election, this would be the person that is right past number 4 or number 3 in the city of Columbus, depending on the election cycle. In a head-to-head, this would simply be the person who got the most votes but didn't win. If that individual is no longer qualified or is not willing to accept the appointment, the entity would then be allowed to appoint any qualified elector to fill the vacancy. We did not find or identify any variations on this. There's one top 50 city that utilizes this process in a limited fashion. That's the city of Boston. Boston has 13 council members. 4 of them are elected at large. The 4 elected at large council members have to be the first loser if they vacate the seat. I would note 2 very important things. First of all, they're elected every 2 years, not every 4 years. Secondly, we are not saying that this has not been used in modern history, but in our research, we couldn't find any instances of this being utilized in Boston. We did, however, find multiple instances of special elections to fill vacancies in districts. Pros and cons that we identified. First, the appointee has stood for election. And then there would be some direct linkage between election and the individual that's appointed. The cons, we do feel that this would directly contradict the electoral process by seating a candidate who lost. In the case of a head-to-head race, like an unexpired term race here in the city of Columbus, that would give the election to the loser of that race. It may require the appointment of someone who is found to be unfit for office. It removes any institutional or electoral checks and balances on the appointment process because it would remove any discretion from council or from the voters in choosing who fills that vacancy. And only one top 50 city on record uses this, and again, in a limited fashion. One thing that we were not asked to look into, but that we felt it was important to raise, and I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this one because it's a little confusing. We're calling it majority trigger. So this would be a case where the entity may vote to appoint a qualified elector to fill a vacancy unless it would result in a majority of the council members being appointed without an intervening election. In that instance, a special election must be used to fill any vacancy until the next regular municipal election. The variations here include a continuity of government plan, whereby another elected official in the city calls a special election if the entire council is vacated due to death or disability. A provision where if a majority of the seats are vacated at the same time period, there's a special election. And then lastly, in the case of a national emergency, authorizing the remaining members of council to make an appointment to those vacancies. To sort of walk through what this would look like in the city of Columbus, we have 7 council members. If 3 council members stepped down and had appointees put in their seats prior to a regular election, and there were a 4th member that stepped down, that 4th member would have to go on a special election. There would be no ability to appoint until the next intervening election. It's also important to note that this applies to unexpired term or special elections as well. So this doesn't speak to how council members were originally placed on council. It speaks only to their appointment without an intervening election. Top 50 cities that use this. Every city in California is required to use this provision. That's actually how we ran into it, doing some research in some of the smaller top 50 cities there. California state law requires this. The city of Houston triggers a special election if more than 1/2 of their council is vacant at the same time. Dallas triggers it if all of council is vacant. And Milwaukee, which otherwise requires special elections, gives the authority to appoint only in the case of a national emergency. So pros and cons that we identified here. It can be used alongside any other vacancy process, and we see that it is actually used alongside those processes. It does ensure that a majority of council has always been elected, even if they were first appointed to council, and it provides for continuity of government safeguard that does not otherwise exist in most city charters. Cons, it doesn't alter the pros or cons of any vacancy process. So whatever the underlying process is not going to be altered here. It's most useful in cities that don't have staggered terms, so cities that would have 4 years before the next election. This does create some very unique separation of powers concerns. Who decides the council is vacant? And who calls for the election. And that's something that we see great variation in the cities that use this. In one city, the city attorney has to go to a court to declare it vacant and have an election called. In another, the mayor has the authority to do that. And then lastly, we would note that special elections are costly in Ohio, and because of our nonpartisan elections, those cannot take place when a party designation is on a ballot, making this very difficult to do in an even year in the state of Ohio. The next thing that we identified was limited appointment, we're calling it public process. Now, obviously, every city that appoints has some process that they follow, but we found that some cities had a much more formal process that they followed that required public input. This would be, again, allowed to appoint to fill a vacancy, but in addition to their current process, applications have to be accepted and made public. Council must use one or more public meetings where some subset of candidates are vetted before council and the public. This would be similar to a confirmation hearing used for cabinet members at the federal or state level. And council would have to vote in public to make the appointment at a public meeting. There are numerous variations here. You look top 50 cities, there are too many to list here that use some variation of this, but we would say that they range from an informal policy to city ordinances and charter requirements. Pros and cons, we think there are, frankly, a lot of pros here. It can be used alongside any normal vacancy process. It removes any mystery surrounding the appointment process, gives the public input prior to council appointments, and it mirrors the confirmation process used at the state and federal level for cabinet appointees. Cons, it would definitely add additional time for an appointment. It would be very challenging to accomplish this in the 30 days currently allowed under our charter. And it does not change any underlying pros or cons of the appointment process to fill vacancies. We have one final option that we were asked to look at, and that would be an unfilled vacancy. So in a single city that uses this for some council members, the office must remain vacant until the successor has been elected, either at the next regular municipal election or at a special election for the unexpired term scheduled on the date of the next municipal election. Didn't find any variations here. There is one top 50 city that uses this in a limited fashion, that's Nashville. They use it only for their 5 at-large council members. Nashville has one of the largest councils in the nation with 40 council members. They don't allow the filling of a vacancy for that at-large council member. Like San Diego, this is the single most contentious section of the Nashville City County Charter. Those sections have been amended in whole or in part. I believe it's in 65, 88, and then by public referendum in 94, 96, and 2007. Pros, removes any potential advantage for incumbency for an appointment. Cons, in the city of Columbus, this could mean a vacancy lasting up to 2 years, depending on the date of a person stepping down. It does have the potential for multiple vacancies at the same time. It would significantly disrupt council operations in ways that cannot be changed. The reason that we say it cannot be changed is that there are certain vote thresholds that are established in the Ohio Constitution or an Ohio state law that cannot be altered by our charter, and this would significantly hamper those operations. It would leave the city without full representation on council for that period of time, and again, it's only used in a limited fashion in one top 50 city. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
And some of the last topics, what if more than one person were to resign? And I guess, can you go back to the caretaker model or the first loser concept? I mean, any examples of what would happen if more than one person resigned at the same time or there was a vacancy of more than one seat?
Right. So in the caretaker model, it would simply be that you would have multiple people appointed that would not be eligible to run. The biggest challenge that would...
I'm so sorry. Just so I can stay with you. When you say not able to run, you just mean in that next election cycle, correct?
That is correct.
They can run again. They just have to skip an election cycle.
Yeah, so without an intervening election. So it would be similar to the state term limits where you can sit out an election and then run again.
Got it.
I would note that this poses a unique challenge in a field council election. If you're talking about a head-to-head election for an unexpired term for a caretaker, it's pretty straightforward. That person can't run for that specific seat in the unexpired term election. But you could also have an individual who has stepped down after that intervening election, so in the final 2 years of a 4-year term. In that instance, you're essentially saying to an individual, you can't run for a general election for council, period. Not just for that seat, but for any council seat. What that would mean for multiple people stepping down, just simply multiple people who can't run. For the first loser, I think that presents far more challenges. First of all, you could be going back to an election that happened almost 4 years ago. Secondly, you could be going to individuals who have been clearly proven to be unfit for office through the electoral process. If you had multiple people step down, I think it would be very unlikely that you would find multiple losers, if you will, that would be willing to step in or able to step in at that point.
Brian, with respect to your last comment there, if we didn't go back before, but went back to the most recent municipal election, it would not be more stale than 2 years. Is that right?
I think you're correct. If you wanted to make it the most recent municipal election, you certainly could do that. I think the challenge there is that you are appointing someone who did not stand for election for that particular seat.
Be appointing somebody who recently stood for election.
Yes, that is correct.
And you can call them a loser, but they're really the first runner-up, aren't they?
Well, so I would use an analogy here, especially in a unexpired term election. So let's say that Councilmember A resigns, an individual is appointed, and then runs in a special election, head-to-head, for the unexpired term. Let's say that that individual dies before the end of the term. You would have to appoint the person who ran against them in the general election. That would be like Governor Kasich winning the presidency and having to appoint Ed Fitzgerald as governor. So is that really a process that most voters would feel was fair? I think that in our research, I believe there's a reason that we didn't see other cities contemplating this, and I think that's exactly it. That challenge of being outside of a field environment and the potential of a head-to-head election being the election where the person's chosen.
Well, I sense it can get complicated enough to work, but not understood. It could go back just to the most recent election, never farther down than the first runner-up. It had to be a field election and not a head-to-head, but it becomes like Internal Revenue Code, figuring out how to implement it.
I would not volunteer to write that one.
Just looking at the public process appointment, can you give me a quick refresher for the elements of the current process that are public now?
Everyone who wants to seek an appointment has to submit a resume and fill out a questionnaire that's submitted to the city clerk. All of that's made public. All those names typically appear in the dispatch the next day. Council does have the authority to enter into executive session to consider these individuals and to essentially talk to them about that office. There is no requirement that there be a public hearing, but there's also nothing that says council can't have a public hearing.
And are there other council appointment processes where they have, that you noticed, remind me, in the peer cities, were there similar examples of public screening, if you will, of potential council candidates?
Yes, there are certainly peer cities that would allow for an appointment, but in their charter require that council hold a public hearing. The way that you get at who is invited to that public hearing differs from city to city. I do not recall a city that would have all applicants appear in public. That's not to say that doesn't exist, but I don't recall any. Typically, you would have each council member choose one or more individuals to invite in. Each of those individuals would be presented with the same list of questions, and then the public would be allowed to provide their comment at the end of that public hearing.
And just lastly, regardless of the public process appointment, all these appointment process, whatever is determined in the charter, whatever charter changes would be made around the charter process, that still doesn't change the political process of the county party appointing and then, running as a slate or anything to do with that, right?
That is correct.
Thanks.
Other questions? Yes.
Brian, would you explain the part where you said special elections are costly? And then the part that it says may only take place for nonpartisan offices if no party designation is on the ballot. That's confusing. Because the council positions are not designated on the ballot. So are you saying it can't be combined with a partisan race?
Yes. So,
okay, I wasn't sure what you were saying there.
In Ohio, there are 3 types of ballots in a general election. There's an office type of ballot, there is this nonpartisan ballot, and then there's a questions and issues ballot. Only on an office type ballot are you allowed to have a party designation, and you must have a party designation on that ballot. So in a presidential primary, for example, council offices would not be allowed to appear on a ballot with a presidential candidate. So you would either vote for an unexpired term for council, or you would vote for a president. You couldn't pull both ballots in that election. So that's part of what makes special elections in even years challenging for the city of Columbus. It would be much less challenging on the true special election dates, but again, there's no guarantee that there would not be some other partisan office on that ballot. It's just less likely to happen.
So if we decided, just theoretically, if we wanted to have an immediate special election without filling a vacancy, we would run into this little snag about scheduling it? Is that what you're saying?
That is correct. It would potentially work, and well, it would work in an even year. There would be no challenge in having council office on the ballot then. In an odd year, in an even year, you would certainly have challenges. So the way that would most likely have to happen is that you would have to have an election date that is not a state election date. So the city would have to call its own election date, and the city would have to pay the full cost of that. In Ohio, you have to have all of the polling precincts open that you normally would. You have minimum staffing requirements. The cost for a special in the city of Columbus is currently $1.3 million.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, could you have the election in the even years? It would just force a voter to have to choose which ballot they were going to take. So they would either be voting for this council option or the presidential race or whatever, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Yes.
I'm fascinated with that provision. I've been around government a long time and didn't know it existed. What's the background on that? When was it last challenged, and is there appetite to have it changed?
I think that's a great question. I'm not aware of any challenges to it. During my time working at the Secretary of State's office, it was just a common practice and understood practice. I believe that to understand it, you go back to the early 1900s. During the Progressive era, at the time when we began having nonpartisan elections, there was a desire at that time to remove urban party machines from the direct election process by removing either marks or party designation on the ballot, and also banning, as our Constitution does, straight ticket voting by party.
Could I follow up, please? Has the Municipal League or other groups, have they weighed in on this in the near future? It's just something that's there that nobody's ever really challenged.
I'm not aware of any challenge. I'm also not aware of any controversy regarding it, which I think is probably why there hasn't been a challenge. Most cities in Ohio do not have a vacancy process that would lead to this being a problem, which is why I think you probably haven't seen it develop as a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Bob.
Who dictates that city elections are nonpartisan? Is that the Ohio Constitution, or is it the Columbus City Charter?
It's Columbus City Charter.
Okay, so we could end this charade that city elections are nonpartisan and just allow them to be partisan.
Certainly, the city of Columbus could go to a partisan election process.
And then we could have a special election along with a presidential primary or a partisan election year, in even-numbered years.
That is the case. I would note that from the mayor's office perspective, we would not be supportive of that change.
Why not?
We think that nonpartisan elections are a hallmark of our modern city, of our charter. They are one of the most common like city ways of conducting elections, and especially in field elections in this city and in others, are the most likely system to lead to a challenger winning an election. So we see it in previous data that we provided to this committee, partisan elections are far less likely to be challenged and far more likely to be essentially a blowout for the party in power, far more so than our current election system.
So the mayor would like nonpartisan city elections. Maybe he might encourage his party not to slate people then and not get involved in city elections and let them truly be nonpartisan.
With due respect to the committee member, I think that party politics is outside of the scope of the Columbus City Charter.
Other questions? Other questions? Okay. Thank you for all the
Thank you.
updated data. And I think I mentioned before, it's been a long night already. We are going to have working meetings after this, so there won't necessarily be presentations, but obviously there's a lot of material. So if members have questions, you can let me or Edward or others know that you have questions, and we can still answer those during our working meetings. So thanks for everyone's time. We are going to move on to public comments. I believe we have 4 speakers, and I apologize ahead of time for not saying names correctly, but I believe it's Pastor Nancy Day Ockauer? Okay, Ockauer. Thank you. Please.
And you'll be pleased to know I will not go anywhere near 5 minutes. As a community leader on the far west side of Columbus, I'm compelled to stress the importance of community input in city governance through our area commissions. Columbus is a large and diverse city whose city council lacks local representation from all areas of the city. In my community, lack of representation has resulted in decades of neglect. Elected officials who are unfamiliar with the neighborhood lack the information needed to make informed decisions affecting that community. Additionally, this unfamiliarity can lead to misunderstandings, resulting in neglect or other negative impacts, as has happened in my community. Currently, area commissioners play a non-binding advisory role in decision-making regarding zoning and serve as liaisons with the city. We can do much more if given a greater voice. We know the needs and the cultural context of our communities and can provide input that would help create equity of city services and improve economic vitality and quality of life throughout the city of Columbus. The current governance structure of Columbus has left the Westland area underserved and economically depressed, and we are not alone. I do not believe that the city of Columbus can effectively turn our situation around without a system allowing a form of authentic local representation. I implore the Charter Review Committee to institute changes to the charter that will incorporate a system of actual local representation in our city governance. We need a city government that will work with communities so all neighborhoods can prosper. Thank you.
Thank you. Our second speaker is Emmanuel Remy.
I didn't provide
If you want to give them to the staff, they'll take care of handing them out. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Emmanuel Remy, and I am the president of the Northland Community Council. And I want to thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the committee and staff, for your commitment and the deliberations that you've been going through over the past 6 months or so. It certainly is appreciated. I have a little bit different perspective about this from the prior speaker, but certainly like to think about those types of issues that people that have not been heard. Just to give you an idea, Northland is an area that is the largest community organization in the city of Columbus. If we were our own city, we would be the 7th largest in the state of Ohio. We represent 130,000 people, over 130,000 people, 25 square miles, which is 16% of the city of Columbus. We actually predate the area commission structure, and so therefore we made the decision over time not to go to that method. However, we are recognized by the city in all the ways that an area commission is, except that we're not under the mayor and we don't have open meeting laws, et cetera. So we do have a development committee, which I would put out there as one of the best in the city. It's very thorough. We are recognized by the area, all the BZA, the City Council, of course, and all the other graphics and those types of committees. In fact, some of the questions that I heard a little bit earlier, most of those committees won't hear a case unless it's gone through us first. So even though by statute it's not required, the BZA, for instance, won't, if they don't have our blessing or non-acceptance of a case, they won't hear the case. They'll send it back to us. So we are thoroughly recognized in that way. Issue 1 gave us an opportunity, especially in my community, to think a lot about the governance that we have here in the city of Columbus. And so I think you can see by the voter turnout and the results in my area what we don't have the concerns of being heard down at City Council. We've worked very hard as an organization. In my 5 years as president, and my predecessor, who served, Dave Paul, who served for about 6 years, we have worked very hard to build strong relationships downtown. One of the comments, and I heard it throughout the campaign of issue 1, was that there's nobody down there. There's no area commissioners down there. They're not being heard. But the reality of it is that we have their cell phone numbers, and I'd rather not spend a Monday night down at City Council listening to the mundane of legislation when I can simply text any one of my council members or talk with any one of their staff at my leisure. So, I don't think that represents any type of indication of whether or not we're being represented thoroughly, because I certainly suggest to you that that is not the case. I think as you look at the city of Columbus, it is time with the number of members of population to expand council, and I think that it's something that you could see 9 to 11 members would be something that seems to relieve some of the burden that the current council members face with committee assignments, and then also being able to represent certain areas. One of the things that I suggested was that we do have this area commission structure in place, and also, of course, the Northland Community Council, Northwest Civic Association, all the other associations that represent their areas. We could work to strengthen some of those. One of the things, until tonight, I actually didn't realize that the mayor appointed, but most of the area commissions are actually elected. What's not unique about that is they are elected kind of by design of each area commission. So if Clintonville, for instance, is held at an off time, and they have 9 different districts, so they're not, you could make that more official, for instance, and maybe they're voted in on on an actual election day instead of at a library where people just fill out a ballot, for instance. So there were some ways that you could strengthen that. And then as the at-large system, how it's been working in the city of Columbus, an individual, and we've taken some great strides this year, one with the Department of Neighborhood Services, also with President Klein developing is that my time? Developing the neighborhood services and that sort of thing. So I think that they could do some strengthening by assigning a council member to each one of a particular area rather than mandating it by district. I'll wrap up here real quick, but I would say that what we have today is working, that we lead the list in so many ways of being the top city in so many different ways across the nation. So if something is working so well, maybe we're doing the thing the right way, doing the system the right way, and the others it may not be. So I appreciate your time, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Our third speaker is Jeanette Walson. Sorry.
Nobody gets that one right. Yes. Jeanette Wallison, close enough. I mean, if you want. What I brought was an actual legislation notice, or a zoning notice for my neighborhood, and I was very disappointed in the process. Before we got this one-page notice in the mail that told us nothing, there was development committee hearings, there were area commission, or not area commissions, we don't have one, civic association meetings that we knew nothing about. There was no process to notify the neighbors that were affected by this, and this really affects a larger area than the 125-foot zone. So there was no notification. When we got this notification, we were told to look on the city's website, and all the information would be there, which it is not to this day, not there. So we started to feel, once we attended the meeting and found out what things were about and did some inquiries, that we were that 6-month-old child getting green beans for the first time. You know, it was just not sitting real well. So I think there's some real gaps on how those people without area commissions and those even with area commissions, how they get notifications about those legislations that affect their neighborhoods. I could go on and on about this one piece, but it's still very frustrating to this day. And I don't see any way that is being addressed on how those area commissions, and I really would like to see some changes, that map that we see, none of that north area is covered. And on those people, and I'd like to hear from some of the people that have area commissions, how they found out or how they notify their areas on things that are happening in their areas. So, thank you.
Yeah, actually, just 1 second.
Did you get this in the mail?
No, I did not. I live directly across the street from that property,
Okay.
and the applicant actually did not give me the correct address. He gave it, my neighbor gave it to me.
Okay.
So, and that's another faux pas in the zoning thing. That's not to do with area commissions, but the applicant provides the addresses to send the notification to, and mine was wrong.
Okay. Did you try to call any council members or?
Well, yeah, I've been doing that since. But to reach 7 council members, and only one of which has an actual email address, everyone has staff members, and it gets filtered through. So yeah, we've been doing our best to lobby against this zoning change.
Did you speak to any council members, or did they tell you to call the development department or the zoning department, or did they
I have
handle
good
your
and bad
concern?
on both of that.
Okay.
We've met with a couple of the council members that were not on council when this was first applied for and heard. And we actually had a council member come to our homes to say, oh, is this what you're talking about? That was Michael Stinziano. That was the only person that actually responded in a positive manner. And get a lot of political answers like, well, I don't know what's best here, but I'll think about it and I'll consider it and I'll get to you later. But it's, zoning is a hotbed issue for anybody, especially when it's your neighbor across the street. Right. Building a cement plant, or that's not the case. But, so it's a real hotbed issue. So yes, we got some good responses and some non-responses.
Thank you. Can you clarify, just because we're talking about the process, so does this area have an area commission? I think you said no. So there's no
we
area
have a
commission.
civic association, Far Northwest Coalition, that meets
okay.
once a month if there's a zoning issue or a BZA or a graphics. However, I've only lived in Columbus for 5 years, and I fell in love as soon as I got here. No, not quite. But did not know how that process worked in this city.
Okay.
So when I was given that notice by my neighbor, I called zoning to say, wow, what is this?
Uh-huh.
And
did this already go to city council, and was it voted on?
It's been tabled for over a year.
Okay, so city council has not acted to approve or
Correct.
disapprove this
Correct.
at this time?
Correct.
Okay.
So, mostly because of our opposition. It's been tabled.
Okay, so this zoning change has not been approved
Correct.
and implemented?
It's not been. It's still tabled.
Okay.
So. But I think the process is poor.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as letting people know what's going on. I mean, that's a big business that's going to affect more than 125 feet of property
I think what you're
frontage.
referring to is partially just the statute of how zoning works versus area commissions or the city council structure in general.
And the area commissions, because they're not required to notify anybody that they're meeting on that issue prior to the hearing at City Hall.
That's what I was just what I was just going to clarify was that that's correct. Area commissions don't have any requirement to give notice for their specific hearing of this topic. Right. Their meetings have to be public, and different area commissions handle that notification process differently. For example, the area commission that I chair, we give notice of our meeting where we're going to discuss an application to the exact same list that you're required to give notice to once it goes to Development Commission, BZA, City Council, so that people know from the beginning what the process looks like. Mm-hmm. But so what would typically happen, at least in my area, is when this applicant filed an application, mm-hmm. we would give notice of our meeting, then you would get the same group of people. Sounds like your address was wrong. The same group of people would get that notice. The addresses are provided by the developers. So there's representing that those are an accurate list of property owners within 125 feet of the parcel in
But there's
question.
no requirement for you to do that.
No, that's correct. That's what I was going to say. The area commissions are not required to do that, and you'll see each, whether most of them post their agendas and things like that, but whether people know to go out and read those or participate every month, that usually presents a challenge when I'm not sure if this went to the Development Commission or BZA, but those notices then get mailed to the property owners by the city, and sometimes residents are finding out for the first time because they're not connected to the area commission or civic association process.
And it's very limited information there.
Yeah.
So.
Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
Excuse me for saying that's a perfect example. If there were resources, processes could be improved, and back offices could execute them perhaps.
This is just my commentary. I don't even necessarily know that it's back office required if it was just more standard of what was expected. The thought never crossed my mind until I sat on the BZA, or not on the BZA, I'm sorry, on the Development Commission and watched this happen where neighbors were getting the notice for the first time because they didn't know about the area commission. So I think just making a standard, I think some of what, if you studied area commissions, you would see is just a lack of a standard process that would make those groups easier and neighbors to know that everyone gets notice or this is the process. Even websites that was mentioned, they're handled by the area commission. So how good our website is dependent upon how good somebody in my area can make a website. I have the password. It's not easy. I don't know anything about websites. Thank you. Our fourth speaker is Kathleen Wolf, I believe.
Thank you, everyone. I'm so impressed that the city appointed a review commission for the charter. I live in the same neighborhood as Jeanette, our last speaker, on Billingsley, right across from the big windmill and Byers auto dealership. And the real issue in our neighborhood is that the Byers attorney and their application is trying to overlook the fact that there's no precedent for these dealerships that are directly across from residential neighborhoods to build forward into a setback, a 200-foot setback. Have you ever driven down Billingsley? There's that great big green space that protects our neighborhoods. Well, they are trying to expand forward on buyers and use that as the precedent to then allow all the other dealerships in our one block, which are Bob Boyd, Dennis Hyundai, and the other two, to also build forward into that setback. Well, what's really serious, you saw that little 2-page, which is 2 of 7 that was sent to us. The other 5 never got to us. But beyond that, when we went to the hearing, and thank God Jeanette and I, even though we didn't know what was happening, showed up, we realized the importance of this, because not only would they add, in buyer's case, 73 parking spaces within 75 feet of our front yards, but there are all kinds of hidden material which allows a 7,000 square foot building to be built right in front of our homes as well. And it was presented on the application as they're just expanding parking. And in fact, we went to our commission. That's how we learned what was going on. We were very impressed by John Murley and the Far Northwest Coalition, because they helped us see all the issues. And the most important was that civic group unanimously voted against this proposal for the stated reason that there was no precedent for expansion across from residential neighborhoods. Well, when it got into the hearing, the lawyer represented it without any mention of the precedent. And when council members asked what happened with Far Northwest Coalition, because Jeanette and I mentioned it in our 3-minute speeches, staff actually said it was opposed, that they didn't say why. And in fact, and now there's an attempt to do revised amendments to this. And in fact, the lawyer is slipping in that council members were aware of opposition by Far Northwest, but that doesn't state the reason, which is the lack of precedent. And in fact, now we're very grateful that the mayor tabled indefinitely, so did Priscilla Tyson, and the others say that they will not allow this to be back on the table until they know the neighbors' concerns are resolved. But there's no process or method for us to have good access, and in a way, many council members hardly want to meet to us because it's tabled indefinitely. Why should they be involved? So it's kind of an issue, and all of you people here are so involved. And this first speaker, I really relate to that. And that second speaker, I wish I had cell phones of all the council members, because maybe I could get something done here. But because auto dealerships are huge media investors, we can't hardly get anyone in the media to think about the issue. But imagine driving down I-270. These dealerships are closer than anywhere in the city to where they can put in not only, in our case, 73 extra spaces, but expanded, which have to be LED lights. And there are currently 110 light bulbs, and there would be another 30 more. And these, with the ambient light, will reach over 270 all the way to Worthington. They're going to be affecting the iron yards, the neighbors' backyards. And there's nothing mentioned in any of the new testimony, the new application about the lighting. They say that the zoning has to go first, and then all this other stuff gets decided later. But why can't zoning be dealing with safety and everything else? And in fact, the code for the CPD to CPD changes requires issues that are missing, and no one in zoning ever looked at any of this. We've done extensive work comparing how the current zoning will be gutted with additions, deletions. It's nothing like what we have now, and yet, zoning can just recommend, and the city seems to be rubber stamping and recommending this, and none of the residents are informed, and in fact, the 125-foot rule means only a couple neighbors are involved, where there are 16 single-family homes directly across from those dealerships that will all expand, and we few that are, Jeanette and I are trying to do something, yet what we decide will affect all of those neighbors who aren't even required to know, because if the precedent, once the precedent's there, all these other dealerships can then apply. And that's what happened when the auto pads went in. They had display pads that came in within the setback. Once buyers did it,
We're going to stick to our time.
yeah, the same
We
lawyers
appreciate your comments.
did the
Thank
same
you.
thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
I think we're good. Thank you. And I believe our last speaker is Jonathan Beard.
Good evening, thank you. I realize I'm the last person between you and your warm beds, so I'll try to be brief. I did not submit some charts, so you don't have anything to look at, so I'm going to kind of go off the top of my head, and I'll ask and hope that you look at them later when I submit them tonight or later. I wanted to kind of summarize some things that you've heard over the last couple months and correct the record on one thing first. We've heard presentations, I think, in mid-October, where we heard that our at-large elections, our field elections are competitive, and the average margin between the highest loser, the biggest loser, and the smallest winner is 5.6%. And that didn't sound right to me, and I went back and looked at the election results, and it's not right, and that's one of the tables I submitted. In last year's elections, the actual losing vote margins were 14%, 44%, 65%, and 67%. The year before that, or 2013, Republican candidates lost by 39%, 42%, and 62%. And in 2011, those vote margins were 39%, 44%, 47%, and 50%. So the question is, why are races so non-competitive? It may also be because campaign money follows the winners, and challengers don't have the money to reach voters citywide, so nobody knows who they are. So we've got these field elections, they're not in neighborhoods, nobody knows who half these candidates are on the ballot. In 2013, the challengers raised less than $17,000, while incumbents raised $375,000. So if a stamp costs 39 cents, the challengers could mail a single letter to just about 10% of the Columbus electorate. That's the issue with fair and competitive elections. In 2011, the challengers raised $275,000, a lot, in that mayoral year, but incumbents raised $758,000. So we've got these tremendous imbalances that add to this problem. And then we find out the incumbents themselves aren't really raising the money. In the last two election cycles, or the 2013, 2011 election cycles, I haven't looked at 2015, it's been the council president that's providing about 72% of all the incumbent council members' funding. So we've got incumbent council members who can't even raise money for their own campaigns, let alone challengers. That's the issue. So we can look at small things, but we also, I think, have to step back and continue to look at the big picture there. Just as important, when you look at those results, you look at undervoting. People who don't vote for all the candidates on the ballot, or don't vote for the 3 or 4 members in the field race, but vote for 1 or 2. And when you look at our last election, none of the above came in first place last year with 198,052 votes, non-votes, compared to the highest candidate, who was Zach Klein, who had 90,716 votes. So voters were twice as likely to not select all the candidates than they were to select the winning candidate. And because of the high rate of undervoting, which is 40% of the 500,000 votes cast for council last year, only 3 of 12 winning candidates dating back to 2011 actually got a vote from the majority of the people who cast ballot in council races. So last year, 2 members received votes from a majority of the electorate and 2 didn't. In 2013, 1 got a majority and 2 didn't. And in the 2011 election, not a single one of the 4 elected candidates received a majority vote. So what that says about our elections is people aren't crazy in love with our candidates. They probably don't know them. And most are thankfully reluctant to use the party slate cards that are handed out. Most people, I think, or a lot of people, want to actually think and vote for themselves and think for themselves. So I think, you dealt today with the appointment issue, where there's also a chart I'm going to submit that shows only 4 of the last 32 council members gained their seat by election, dating back to 1985. Every one of the black Democrats was initially appointed to their seat, and then, as the campaign finance reports show, they were kept in their office by the council presidents, large S. In contrast, 4 white Democrats gained their seat by election over that time period. So we've got a system where black Democrats must wait around faithfully seeking appointment, and many who could be leaders have to wait around and never get selected. And then once appointed, they owe their continued political life to the person, the council president, who led the appointment process, because they need his money. So the appearance is they are more accountable and more responsive to the council president and the political bosses than to the people. And that's the issue. If it's not reality, it's at least perception. And that's the issue that we should all be concerned about with our elections. So in 2011, for example, the council president provided 75% of Councilwoman Mills' campaign and 90% of Councilman Craig's campaign. In 2013, 72% of Tyson's campaign and 90% of Councilman Miller's campaign. And I have to think that's why in October, when citizens came to council to talk about the shooting of police shootings of unarmed black men and children, once the council president ran out the back door, shamefully, all the black members of council ran away with him. It was more important for them to show solidarity with the council president who appointed them and was providing their campaign money than to stand with and listen to the people who are coming down to express this community's pain and who are asking for help. Should council members be full-time? No. The role of a representative body is to be intimately familiar with the people they represent, not to draw people out of the population, then set them apart and give them special privileges over us. If the workload is too heavy, share it. Our council is too small, which has been recognized since the mid-1950s and reiterated by Councilmember M.D. Portman in 1999. And you've got a fact sheet that has this quote where he says, "The council is going through the motions of trying to represent all of the city. I think the city has just grown too big to be represented by 7 members. With the annexation of a chunk of southern Delaware County, the city's even bigger. 7 council members for almost 700 people is ludicrous. We're out of date. So add council members for sure, but not members who run in these citywide elections that they can't afford. Also, because of the expense and difficulty of running citywide elections, we've only fielded enough candidates for primaries in 14 of the last 25 election cycles. So individuals and parties are making decisions not to run as candidates based on expense and likelihood of success. We're losing people who want to step up and lead, and we're losing them simply because our system is broken by design. Change isn't going to come within the Democratic Party, because in handpicking our representatives and holding those winning seats and giving the money, Democrats hold all the power, and that corporate and politician campaign money flows to the party. I'm an elected Franklin County Democratic Party Central Committee member. This spring I ran for and won election to the 55th Ward seat on the Near East Side. I was hoping to be a voice for change from within. Probably goes without saying that I was not the endorsed candidate for that race, but I won. I'm in the inside and I see the money and the power game of the party, and I'm sickened by it. I'm black before I'm Democrat, and I'm ashamed of the party for selling out black Columbus to cling to money and power. If the party was really for the people, it would have continued to support a council elected by district as it did in the 1950s. It would not support an at-large voting system that the NAACP Legal Defense Fund calls discriminatory, with the only question being whether it's unlawfully discriminatory, which can only be decided by a judge. Black folk on council are all appointed. If you eliminate the appointment process, you'll have no black faces on council to presumably represent black citizens. So if you change the appointment process, then you have to change the format of council, create non-discriminatory methods of election like council districts, aggressive campaign financing with caps on contributions like citizens have voted for once, but council never enacted as legislation. Change won't come from the party in power, and it won't come from the politicians. It has to come from the citizens. Frederick Douglass said, as you all know, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, it never will. You're citizens drawn from this populace, and you are our representatives to represent us in this political process. You've got a very important role, and I urge you to, you don't have the power to make change, you have the power to recommend change, but you do have a moral authority should you choose to summon it. Our current system doesn't have 1 or 2 problems, it's got a litany of problems. It's not unlike electoral systems anywhere else in the nation. And it's not surprising that few people show up for this meeting, although this is good turnout. This is like watching paint dry for most people. Most people didn't like 11th grade civics class, and they don't like this stuff. So you're in a unique position of trust. You've been asked to do this work. You've got an opportunity to really make substantive change. So I'd ask that you not tinker with things here or there. We've got major problems with our system, just like every electoral process does, because the politicians design the systems, and then they maintain the systems, and we as citizens walk away from them. So what I'm asking you to do is step up on our behalf as citizens and make the changes that we as citizens want to see.
I think we're well over the 5 minutes. Do you want to conclude?
Yeah. I guess I'd say, we hear all kinds of superlatives when community leaders describe Columbus. Show us that the Columbus way does not mean that black citizens will forever have our every electoral choice ratified by white citizens. Show us that you believe black citizens in Columbus are in fact full citizens with equal rights, because you will advocate that we live in an electoral system that does not overshadow our voting rights with racial hegemony. So again, thank you. Please look out for the documents that I'll be submitting. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I think we appreciate the turnout again, and I appreciate all the committee members' attention. So we will not meet again until January 5th. I believe that date worked for the majority of people on the committee. Again, those are public meetings. We aren't going to be having presentations, but they will be public, so everyone's welcome to attend. There are working group meetings to kind of flesh out what we want the content of our final report to be. We will probably have 1 or 2 more meetings after that. Edward's going to take the initiative to track everyone down and figure out what those dates will be, but they will be after January 5th. So we're not going to meet again until January 5th. And I believe we'll meet at City Hall, but the details will be shared. Heat there? I'm sorry? Heat there? I don't know. Heat may be optional. I like things chilly, but it is a little chilly. So, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.